Yo, welcome back everybody to a brand new video here on the second channel, and today it is time to do the Portland meta discussion video. Some of my favorite videos to make here on the second channel are the meta videos. I have a ton of decks here lined up, and I am super excited to take a look at each list and kind of break down what I think is going to be at Portland. Portland is the second major tournament in the Scarlet and Violet format, and I'm really excited. If y'all are excited too, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe down below here to the second channel so you never miss an upload and all that good stuff. But yeah, I'm excited for Portland. Portland is going to be a really interesting tournament because, again, it's the second major tournament in the Scarlet and Violet format, coming off of EUIC, but also coming off of all the cups and challenges that we've now had back in the game. So, to start things off, of course, the best deck in the format. The one that I think is going to be the most popular, well, maybe not the most popular, but arguably has a good chance of maybe being the most played deck, and that is Gardevoir EX. Gardevoir EX is a very strong deck right now, and I truly believe that it is the deck to beat. Like, if I was going to Portland, I would want my deck to beat Gardevoir. Like, yeah, I would maybe have a game plan or two against Lost Box, but for the most part, I would just want to make sure my deck beats Gardevoir. I think Gardevoir is positioned to be the best deck at Portland, or the one that maybe has the potential to be the most played deck. Now, there's the possibility Gardevoir isn't the most played. There's a chance Lost Box will be the most played. If Pokemon just, I guess, combine every version of Lost Box together, Lost Box will be the most played. But I truly think that Gardevoir will be the most played deck. I think it has a possibility of being the most played deck. I think the deck is that good. It's very popular. I've played against a ton of Lost Box at my locals, so, like, it's just super popular right now. It's winning a lot of tournaments and cups and league challenges, and Gardevoir is just really good. I think that Towards list is good. I do think there is some innovation to be made. I've seen some people experiment with Champions Festival. There's also Path to the Peak or Escape Rope, just like a pseudo counter to Vulpix. I like Path more than Rope. Path does let you use Roxanne in the mirror match, so you can Roxanne Path in the mirror, or you can use Path to obviously shut off Vulpix, and then you just kill Vulpix with Zacian V. So I think that the Gardevoir deck has a lot of room for innovation for Portland. I don't think Towards exact 60 is optimal right now, but I do think that the baseline for the list is there. You just have to take out a couple of cards to kind of tweak the list to make it a bit better. But I do think that Gardevoir is definitely going to be the best deck, and I think we're going to see Gardevoir do well at Portland. I think we're definitely going to see Gardevoir in top 8. Maybe even Gardevoir will be in finals. I think Gardevoir has a good chance of making it to finals. Next up is the Gardevoir Mewtwo deck, kind of punching them together. It's kind of the same thing. Mewtwo is, a lot of people say, is the worst version of Gardevoir, and I kind of agree with that. I think Mewtwo is definitely the version of Gardevoir that is slightly worse than the normal version, but Mewtwo does have its benefits. Some lists are playing the Klefki in the deck, some lists don't play Klefki. I think that the Mewtwo Guardia list has a lot of potential in the format still. Mewtwo is just a very strong card and is very good. The only issue with Mewtwo, you don't use it in some matchups. Like, you're not going to use it in something like even Arctina. You're not going to use it against Lugia. And even against Lost Box, it can be sketchy, because if they're playing the Galarian Moltres or the Drapion V, it's a little sketchy. But Mewtwo Gardevoir is definitely a strong deck regardless, and I wouldn't be surprised if people did play it, because it's still a good deck, right? It's still strong. It's still a Gardevoir deck at the end of the day. You just have a Mewtwo in the deck, which either is going to be good or bad, you know what I mean? So I think people will still play it. It's still a strong deck, and I think that it's still going to be somewhat played. Not as much as normal Gardevoir, but I do think that it's going to be played. Next up, we got to talk about Lugia. I think Lugia is the second best deck in the format right now. Lugia is just really good, and I think that if Gardevoir isn't going to be the most played deck, Lugia might be the most played deck. Lugia is just very strong. I think Lugia lists have to play the Duraludon going forward, because I think Duraludon is just really good right now. In Lugia, if, you kind of play a game of chicken in the Lugia mirror, you take out their Duraludon, you win the game. Or if they take out your Duraludon, you lose, or they prize a Dura, but you get your Dura and play, you win. But yeah, I think Dura is just really good in Lugia right now. It's also good against something like Goodra VSTAR. We are able to shred through the Goodra. But yeah, Lugia is great right now. Pretty good chance we're going to see a Lugia or two in top 8 at Portland. Very high possibility. I think Duraludon is optimal in Lugia now, and I think that definitely Lugia with Dura is just a pretty strong deck right now. And again, pretty high chance we could see Dura or Lugia with Dura in top 8 at Portland. It's just Lugia. It's also got one of the better Gardevoir matchups right now, thanks to the T-Tar and the Yveltal. Next up is Lost Zone decks. Now, Lost Zone, I guess, will be the most played deck if you combine every version together, but if we're not talking, variants of Lost Box altogether, and we're talking like Turbo and, the other versions, it's not going to be the most popular deck. Turbo Lost Box is, I think, the best way to play Lost Box right now. It's the one that tempo's the best. It has the best matchup spread. This list here, I got, I don't know if it's the best way to play it as, like, cross-switcher and stuff. I just nabbed it off of Limitless, but you get the point. Turbo Lost Box is still a great deck right now in the format. I think that has a very high chance of doing well. Turbo Lost Box is good, but the problem, I think, with the deck ultimately is just the conversion rate of players. Like, again, it's hard to play Lost Box. It's not as easy to play as, like, something like Lugia, and I think that Lost Box has a weaker conversion rate. But there is a chance Turbo Lost Box could get top 8. It's a good deck right now, and I think it's the best way to play Lost Box, though some people would argue it is Reshizard, or Reshiram, or Charizard, Radiant Charizard. I can't believe I just said Reshizard. This isn't 2019. Yeah, no, Turbo Lost Box is really good right now. I think that definitely, it's good in the format, and will probably have a chance of maybe getting top 8, or at the very least top 16. Turbo Lost Box has a chance to get top 16. I think a lot of good players will be on Turbo Lost Box too. And then we got the Charizard deck. Now, I think Pedro's list is definitely still good. I think that there are changes to be made, whether or not you want to play the Mawile. I don't think you need Miltank anymore. A lot of people have kind of cut the Miltank out of the decks. I do think that Miltank is the most cuttable card in the Radiant Charizard deck, but Radiant Charizard is primed to be a very strong deck going in to Portland, and I wouldn't be surprised if maybe another Radiant Charizard deck maybe ended up getting top 8 like it did at EUIC, because Radiant Charizard is a little bit more of a different way to play Lost Box. Again, you don't have the Greninja, you're relying heavily on that Radiant Charizard, big, late game attacker. It's more of a Sableye Cramorant deck, and then you kind of have that late game Charizard. And potentially, if we don't see much Lost City, this deck can shine a little bit easier, because obviously Alex Szymanski's Duraludon deck, a lot of people will say that it was good for UIC, but isn't as good for Portland, and we could see that make a difference, because the problem with the Radiant Charizard deck is it loses very badly to Lost City. I have seen some Radiant Charizard decks, though, start to play the Galarian Moltres in the deck, because it synergizes really well with Clara. It gives you another big late-game hitter, and it's also really good against against Gardevoir EX and against Mew EX, so there is some room for that to make an impact. And then we got to talk about the Moltres build. So we got Nicholas Moffat's Moltres Lost Zone deck, kind of skeleton. Some people would argue that you could maybe get away without playing the Moltres. Some people say that a Kyogre deck is just better than not having the Moltres in the deck. Either way, I wouldn't be surprised if we did see a Lost Zone Kyogre deck do well. The problem with Lost Zone Kyogre is, can it do well enough to get all the way to top 8 is going to be the question. It might. If a really good player does well with the Kyogre build of Lost Box, we could see the Kyogre deck in top 8 at Portland. But I do think Kyogre is going to be good. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a big player or two on the Kyogre deck. I think that's going to be one of my main predictions, is I think Kyogre is pretty insane for Portland Regionals, and there's a good chance we could see a really good player on the Kyogre deck. I mean, obviously Nick Moffat's a good player, but I mean, like, another really high-level top player is going to really be like, okay, yeah, Nick's onto something. I think this Kyogre is definitely really good, and I think that there will be a good player on Kyogre. Will it get top 8? I'm not sure. The Kyogre is definitely a lot harder to play. Like, I think, again, if your average Joe Schmo were to play a Kyogre deck, they won't do as well, because, again, Kyogre is a bit more difficult to pilot. The Moltres Kyogre deck is a little bit harder to play in general, in my opinion. But I do think that the Moltres could be popular in Lost Box. I think that there's a good chance we also see Moltres see more play this weekend. I think a lot of people have figured out Moltres is pretty good right now in the format. It's a really good, strong attacker in the late game. It's also a dark Pokemon, so it gives you a better time into Mew and into Gardevoir EX. And I think that Lost Box might start incorporating Moltres in their decks going forward. So honestly, wouldn't be surprised if we saw Moltres in UIC. And if any Lost Box deck could make top 8, there's a chance we could see a Galarian Moltres. I think Moltres is a pretty strong play for Portland Regionals, so I definitely wouldn't be surprised if a lot of Lost Box decks that did well happen to play the Galarian Moltres in the deck, because it's just a really good card to play in the deck, and it's a dark Pokemon, which is just really good right now. It's a good type to have. Next up is Mew. So we got Pablo Meza's Double Turbo Mew. I think the list is pretty perfect. I don't even know if there's many things you could change about the list going into Portland Regionals. I think if you're going to play Mew for Portland, I think, yeah, this Pablo Meza's list is perfect. Now, I could see a Mew get top 8. I don't know if Mew can win the tournament, but I definitely can see a Mew get top 8. I think that Mew is a pretty good deck for Portland, and at least one Mew is probably going to squeak out a top 8 placement at Portland Regionals. It's just a strong deck. It's a Judge Path deck, which is very good right now, and I think Pablo's list is probably just perfect for the Mew list. I think it's the perfect Mew list. I don't know if there's anything to change about the list after playing it. Like, people would argue the Fan of Waves is cuttable, but Fan is good against Lugia, because they're able, you're able to get rid of the gift energy, which hurts them quite a bit. So yeah, Mew is pretty good, and I wouldn't be surprised if at least one Mew deck got top 8 in Portland. And then we got to talk about the Lost Zone Giratina deck. Now, Lost Tina is kind of a meme. A lot of people say that it's a good deck right now. A lot of people say that it's a bad deck right now. It's kind of a very divisive archetype. Though its online tourney performance has been pretty solid recently, and that's kind of a sign that maybe Giratina is not as bad as everyone says it is. Now, for my EUIC video, I did say that Lost Tina was going to win the entire tournament, and look what happened. It didn't even get top 8. So I don't know where Giratina goes into Portland. I'm not going to make that prediction again. I'm not saying Giratina is going to win. I don't think we'll see a Giratina in top 8. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Giratina perform well, though. There could be a couple in top 16, top 32. I don't think we're going to see a Giratina in top 8, though. You know what? I'm calling it. I'm going to play it safe. Because a lot of people would argue that Giratina is a worse Lost Box deck. And with, like, the Moltres and the Kyogre, you know, Lost Box deck starting to kind of get more attention, there's less of a reason for Giratina to be popular, which is kind of my take there with Giratina. But I think Giratina is still a solid deck, though I think that I don't think we're going to see it get top 8. I said it was going to win UIC, or it had a chance to, and then it just didn't happen. So, yeah, I'm playing it safe. I'm going to say, no, not even getting top 8 this time like it did. But, yeah, Giratina's fine. I think its matchup spread into the Arceus matchups are a little bit stronger. Star Requiem is very, very good, and it has a better time in a Goodra, and whether or not Goodra is more popular, you know, at Portland Regionals, we'll, you know, debate whether or not Giratina could perform better, because I think Giratina has a good matchup against Goodra. It's just that Lost Box mirror match is a little bit more awkward and less, you know, good. Especially because Giratina is a little less consistent than Lost Box, because you don't have as much switch, and it's just a bit slower. And then we got Goodra to talk about. I think Goodra has a good chance of doing well again. It's just one of those decks that nobody really cares about in the format. Like, when people, like, kind of look at Goodra, they're like, Goodra, I'm not going to bother teching for it, I'm not going to respect it, and then Goodra can do well. It's just a deck that people seem to just not care about and just forget about and be like, Goodra sucks. And then Goodra ends up doing well because people don't care about it. Now, Goodra does have a few things it's got to deal with. One, its matchup spread is kind of awkward all around. I think that it has an awkward matchup against Gardevoir. I think that its Lugia matchup is solid. However, if the Lugia is playing the single strike Urshifu, or they're playing the Duraludon, then Goodra is going to struggle a little bit more, because Duraludon can just shred through Goodra. I think Dura will also play a factor in whether or not Goodra will do well. Now, some Goodra lists are playing the Articuno in the deck, the Paralyzed Articuno. I think Piper got 11th place at UIC, and she had the Articuno in her deck. The Paralyzed Articuno could be kind of a staple in Goodra going forward. Some lists also play the Zamazenta with Retaliate, which isn't bad either. And some lists also happen to play the Vulpix line. The 1/1 Vulpix line is also a pretty cool concept in Goodra. It does help a little bit more against Gardevoir, which again is one of Goodra's less, shakier matchups is Gardevoir, and then having the Vulpix maybe makes that matchup a little bit more winnable. So I think Goodra is still going to be fine. I don't know if we're going to see Goodra in top 8, but I wouldn't be surprised if a couple Goodras got top 32. I think a few good players are going to be on Goodra again. It's honestly not a bad play for Portland. It's just, we got to figure out the best, concept for Goodra, because it's a deck that does have room for tech cards, like the Articuno or the Vulpix, and I think depending on the tech card you play is going to be depending on how far you're going to get with Goodra. Next up is Dura. So, honestly, I put this in the top 5, and I even said, Alex Szymanski said himself the deck might not be good going forward, but I think Dura is still a good deck for Portland. The deck is still solid, or at least like an Arc box deck. You don't even have to play Vulpix. Maybe you can play a different, V Pokemon in your Dura list. But honestly, Dura is still fine. I mean, I think you can beat Lugia if you KO their only Duraludon, and they can't find the Thornton or whatever, then you're still going to be fine. Like, if you just set up like 2 Duraludons against Lugia, you're probably still winning the game. And I think that Dura is still just a big enough presence and threat in the format that I think there's still things you got to know and have to respect the Dura going into Portland, you know what I mean? Like, it's still like a respectable card. It's still a very scary card. Lugia, just because they play a way to attack Duraludon doesn't mean Lugia is automatically going to beat Dura. A lot of the time, Arceus is more consistent than Lugia because it has Starbirth, and Lugia has to rely heavily on just making sure they're getting the double Archeops going, which is a little bit more difficult as opposed to Arceus just going attach, Starbirth, build up Dura, you know what I mean? So Dura is still fine in the meta. A lot of people are saying that it's fallen off. I think it's still a decent play. Whether or not you play the Vulpix, up to you. Again, if Gardevoir respects the Vulpix, they play the Ralts, or they don't, or they play a Path, or they play a Robot. Like, if they play a guaranteed counter to Vulpix as opposed to a Ralt, which is not as good against Vulpix, that kind of is up in the air. But you don't even have to play the Vulpix. Maybe you can just play Dura without Vulpix. You know what I mean? So Dura is still really good in my opinion. I personally wouldn't play it, but I wouldn't be surprised if Dura got like a couple top 16. I don't think Dura will get top 8, but it definitely has a chance of getting like a top 16 placement. Someone can go far with the deck is basically what I'm trying to say. Then, of course, we have the Arctina deck. Now, Arctina is pretty good. Honestly, if I was going to Portland, I probably would have played Arceus Giratina. I think the deck is solid overall. It's a really good Judge Path deck. Giratina VSTAR is a very aggressive and strong attacker in the meta. I'm not sure I like the V-Guard energy in the deck, though. I don't know if you need V-Guard. I definitely think that the deck probably wants to play just more basic energy, but the V-Guards are fine overall, I guess. You could even play Vulpix with Arctina. You could play Flying Pikachu in Arctina. Both of those are actually pretty good options to put in your Arctina deck. I think Arctina is a pretty solid deck for Portland Regionals, and I don't know if we can see one in top 8. Though you never know with Arceus. Arceus always magically gets top 8 now all of a sudden, right? Or even wins tournaments. But Arctina does have potential to do well at Portland. Maybe not get top 8, but I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of big players did well with it, or even bubbled out of top 8, or almost got top 8, like maybe like 11th or 12th place. And we got to talk about the Arceus Flying Pikachu Vulpix Espeon deck. So kind of like an Arc Pile deck with Espeon. I do like this. This is kind of like an underdog way to play Arceus right now. Espeon's pretty solid against, Lost Tina. It's good against other Arceus decks with its main attack doing so much damage. And also, it does help against Sableye. It's just more of an anti-Lost Box deck more than anything else. And if you're kind of expecting more Lost Box, this deck isn't a terrible pick. I'm not sure that Arc Pile will do well. It might do well, but I don't know if it's going to get top 8. I mean, we saw the highest placing Arc Pile deck in EUIC was this list that I grabbed, and I think it got like 12th place or something, 13th, 11th place, something like that. But yeah, Arc Pile's decent. I'm not sure about this. I mean, the Vulpix definitely is no longer as good as it used to be, though Espeon with Vulpix, ironically, is actually not bad against Gardevoir because you're able to prevent the memory skip rolls from affecting Vulpix, which is kind of funny, but I'm not sure if Vulpix is a safe play anymore. So if you're going to play the Espeon build, you might have to start playing a different line of attacker within the deck to maybe make it a little bit better. But I think that Arc Pile's fine. Not sure it's good enough to get top 8, but the deck's fine and could still probably go far at Portland. Now, there's another interesting deck here. So we saw this Arceus Flying Pikachu deck do well in a recent online tournament. And I did want to note the deck real quick, because Flying Pikachu is kind of not really respected right now in Lost Box. I mean, yeah, they play the Raikou and the Dragonite, don't get me wrong, but Flying Pikachu can be just such a menace to them that it probably doesn't even matter. And this list is very straightforward. We see 4 Double Turbo, 4 V-Guards, and 6 basic energy. So just a very straightforward build of the deck. And Flying Pikachu, Judge Path is probably decent. My main gripe with Pikachu is its damage output is kind of weak. I mean, 160 damage is pretty bad, especially as you're two-shotting most things, but you're not one-shotting a lot of things in the format. But Flying Pikachu is just such a powerful card that if you're, expecting a matchup spread where Pikachu will be good, this deck could actually be a decent play. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody maybe took this idea of this Flying Pikachu deck and ran with it in Portland and maybe not got top 8, but did okay with it and maybe get stage 2 with it. I don't know. Like, Flying Pikachu and Arceus, I think, does have a decent chance of performing well this weekend, and I just wanted to note this deck. And then, of course, we got to talk about Arceus. Now, this is a deck that's kind of rising in popularity right now. Arceus Goodra is a really cool concept that I think actually kind of gets revived in this new format. Because we saw that Arceus Gudra did really well in the Lost Origin meta. I think it, it won a regionals, but I think it can come back in the format. The cool thing with Arceus Gudra is that, yeah, you get to play the Vulpix now in the deck, and I think Vulpix has some value. Yes, Vulpix is a little bit weaker, in our format because of the fact that, Gardevoir is going to be respecting it. But the nice thing about, like, the Arceus Gudra deck is that it kind of gets to play a little bit more, of a safer play. Because you have the Arceus as your backup. You might not get to use Moisture Star. That's kind of the main issue with Arceus. You probably don't get Moisture Star, but the deck does seem fine. This is one of the better performing lists that I snagged off of Limitless. I'm not sure I like this list. I still actually think this deck should just play Path. Like, I think if you're going to play Arceus, you should still play Path in your deck regardless. Like, it'll also help against Gardevoir. Even if you're playing Vulpix, you'll still like having the Path. I think Path is still really good in Arceus. The Lost City's not bad either, or Crystal Cave. Maybe not the Ponchos, but I do think that Arceus could do pretty well in Portland, and, I think somebody might play it and do well with it. It's one of those, like, one-of decks that just randomly can go far in a tourney, and with the hype the deck's getting, it's not bad, and it could be a revival of this deck from the past format. I'd like to see it do well. Next up, we got to talk about Miraidon. Now, Miraidon did get top 8 at UIC, but a lot of people will say that Miraidon is just a bad deck right now. I don't think it's bad. I think we might see one Miraidon player go far in Portland with it. Probably not get top 8 again, but at least go far in the tournament with Miraidon, mainly because Miraidon is just one of those decks that just pops off. It pops off, and I think the Turbo build, if that got top 8, is probably fine enough for a Miraidon deck. Miraidon's fine in the format. I don't know if there's any tech improvements. I mean, I guess you could go back to playing the Magnezone package, or you could try out like a Flying Pikachu in the Miraidon deck. But overall, I don't know if Miraidon's going to go far again, but at least one player might go far there. But I don't think we're going to see like that much Miraidon get, that far in the tourney. At least maybe one player can go far with it, but not that many. Because it is, a lot of people consider it just to be a bad deck, and maybe just you get lucky, hit the right matchups, get, high roll enough that the deck probably can get one player far. Then, of course, we got the Inteleon. Another kind of slept-on deck right now. The main downside of playing the Inteleon deck is you take a pretty awkward matchup to Lugia. But overall, I think its matchup spread is fine. I mean, I think it has a decent time against Arceus decks. I think it's actually pretty decent into Gardevoir still. Gardevoir's fine too. Gardevoir's sketchy, but still beatable because you can pick off the Ralts and Curlias early on, and you have the Drapion VSTAR, which is pretty nice, and it's also pretty good against Lost Box. And if you really want to beat Lost Box at Portland, this could be the deck to play. And I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another Inteleon deck do well. I mean, the last Inteleon deck we saw, this list here, did get 11th place at EUIC, and it was one of those decks that people were like, Inteleon's nothing to respect going into the tournament, and we did see one do pretty well, and we could see the same thing happen again. I don't know if Inteleon can get top 8, but if you hit enough Lost Box, then maybe it's possible. But again, the problem with Inteleon is going to be that Lugia matchup. The Drapion VSTAR helps you a little bit against Lugia, but will it be enough? We'll have to find out. Next up, we got the Sander Control deck here. I think Sander Control is fine. I wouldn't be surprised if somebody played the Control and did well with it. Control's just a deck that I think at least if one good player plays it, that it has a high chance of getting day 2. Probably not getting top 8, but at least getting day 2. Wouldn't be shocked if we saw a variation of Sander's Control deck getting day 2. Maybe, with a couple of, tweaks and improvements maybe to the list overall. I don't know what Sander would really change about the list. I think the list is pretty broken, and I think a lot of people just don't care about Control right now, which is kind of like one of the reasons why a Control deck can randomly just get day 2. And I think wouldn't be surprised, right, if a Control deck got day 2. Next up is some wild card decks. So the first wild card I want to mention was Ice Rider Palkia. I did a video on this deck recently, but I did see one on Limitless, and I wanted to note it. I like the idea of Ice Rider Palkia, or Palkia in general right now. There's kind of this, newfound buzz for Palkia all of a sudden, and I think that Ice Rider Palkia could maybe make a small comeback in the meta. I don't know if the Clef Keys are worth playing in the deck overall, but I do like Ice Rider Palkia right now. It's a pretty interesting idea that I think if explored a little bit further, could maybe do well in a tournament, because it's a slept-on deck. Nobody will see it coming, and I think Ice Rider is pretty good right now, especially in a field full of Arceus VSTAR variants, so Ice Rider will shine. Another wild card was Arcdrago, another deck that just been popping up in online tourneys and randomly just getting okay placements, either missing a top 8 or even getting top 8. So, Arcdrago's been putting up the numbers recently, and I did want to note it here real quick. I really want this deck to do well in the format. I do like the idea, though, of it because, yeah, you do get to play the Path build. You can play, another Judge Path deck, but this time you have Regidrago, so you get to have the ability to use all 3 of the different Dragon Pokemon to copy, which I quite like about this deck. And I do like the idea of Trekking Shoes. I really like this list specifically of Arceus Regidrago, and I just want the deck to do well. I am a believer in Regidrago. I want Regidrago to do good. I want a Regidrago deck to be well. I guess kind of my wild card hot take about Portland. I want to see a Regidrago deck get top 8. I don't think it'll happen, but I would just love it if it did. Next up, I'm going to talk about is the Kyurem deck, another wild card. A deck that's just been, considered a big meme right now, but though it might be a meme, this deck is still kind of, low-key decent. And, again, it's another deck that, despite being a meme, it's actually been getting decent results in online tournaments, which is kind of a telling statement that maybe this deck isn't as bad as people make it out to be. It's really good against 2 and 3 price decks, really good against 2 and 3 price decks. I think if you figure out that Lost Box matchup, this deck could actually go far in a tournament. I would love to see Kyurem do well. If they don't put Kyurem on stream in Portland, bro, I don't know what they're doing. If they get the opportunity to put the Kyurem deck on stream, they gotta do that. But yeah, I would be happy to see a Kyurem deck get day 2. I actually think that one player will get day 2 with Kyurem, but I don't know if we're gonna see multiple in day 2. I don't think we're gonna see Kyurem do that well, but I want to see a Kyurem get day 2. That's another bold prediction I'm gonna make. Another hot take is gonna be I want to see a Kyurem deck get day 2. Finally is the Dialga deck. I couldn't leave Dialga hanging. There's so many people that really enjoy playing the deck right now. The problem with Dialga is that, yes, it is really good if it pops off, but if it doesn't pop off and it just kind of has its setup and its setup isn't as fast, then the deck overall just kind of falls apart and doesn't get to do as well. But I do want to see Dialga do well, and I would love to see Dialga do well at Portland Regionals. I'm kind of more rooting for the Kyurem deck overall and Regidrago, but I want to include the Dialga. I want to see a Dialga deck get day 2, but I would rather see Drago or Kyurem get day 2 over Dialga, but it'd be awesome to maybe see a Dialga deck get day 2. It'd be cool to see Dialga get day 2. But there you go. That is my Portland predictions. Now, if I were to make a prediction on what I think will win the tournament, I mean, I'm either going to go with an Arceus deck, because Arceus just seems to be really good right now, or even Gardevoir could just win the tournament. Gardevoir got second at EUIC, and it just barely almost got there, and I think that maybe it's time for Gardevoir to finally win a regional. So I think Gardevoir is the deck I have predicted to win the whole thing. But honestly, I think that there is potential room for other things. Like, I wouldn't mind Arceus winning the tournament again. I mean, an Arc pile deck to win the tourney. Arceus just is that good of a deck right now. So, I don't know, man. That's my predictions for Portland. Again, probably going to see Lugia in top 8. Definitely going to see Gardevoir in at least the finals, and maybe it'll win the tournament. That's my prediction. The deck that'll win Portland probably is Gardevoir. That's my hot take. Probably going to see an Arceus in top 8. We might see a Lost Box deck in top 8. Maybe even a Kyogre build. I think a really good player will be on Kyogre. I think Moltres is going to be a pretty popular Lost Zone variant. Like, I think a lot of players are going to start incorporating Moltres in their Lost Zone decks. That's another prediction that I have going into Portland. And that is it for me for my predictions video. If y'all enjoyed the video, leave a like and let me know what you think of my predictions down below. What do you predict for Portland Regionals? I am interested to hear it all in the comments below. Thanks for watching the video here on the second channel. To catch y'all another video here. Probably going to look at some new card scans because a lot of new cards are getting revealed. Got to do a video looking at them. That'll be the next video. But yeah, thanks for watching. And might catch you in one of the streams at Portland. See y'all later. Bye-bye.